Good evening. I make it just after 7:30 here in the United Arab Emirates, so time to begin our webinar about the University of Northampton Doctorate of Business Administration program. Welcome to you all. I can see from my name, we've got students around the Middle East and Africa, which is great. What we're going to do tonight, firstly, before I tell you that, let me introduce myself first. I'm Professor Tim Campbell. I'm a visiting Professor of International Management at the University of Northampton, and I also look after the DBA program here, the UAE cohort, here locally. So I'm going to tell you all about the program from my perspective, and that'll take about 20 minutes. So I'm just going to do a presentation for that long, just pulling out some key points about the program. Then after that, you can ask me anything you want about the DBA. So let's get going then. First thing, I shall give you a presentation on some of the key points about the DBA program. Before I talk about the DBA, let me just tell you, because most of you I'm sure haven't been there, where Northampton actually is. And this map of the UK has a great big arrow pointing to the town of Northampton. It's an old historic town that dates back thousands of years and appears throughout English history. It's about an hour by train north of London, and it is there that you will find the University of Northampton. And the campus itself used to be just on the outside of the town, but they just finished and opened last year a brand new campus, built an entirely new campus right in the middle of the town. And it's a very impressive place. And if I just go back 2 slides, that's actually me just after the opening, standing in one of the entrances there. So you get a feel for what it's like. It's on a big greenfield site. So it's got some lovely buildings and lots of greenery, all very close, within very short walking distance to the middle of the town. So that's where the campus is, and on this campus you will find the Senate building, and on one floor of the Senate building, I've just taken a picture on the right there, that is the research students' workplace. So if ever you visit the campus as DBA students, you can stay as long as you like and work in that space. So there's a dedicated space for the doctoral students there. Just a few things about the university itself. Education in Northampton dates back hundreds of years, but from its modern history, the University of Northampton, their origins begins in about the 1920s, and coming up to where it is today, it has about 14,000 students and about 1,500 staff. So it's a pretty big sizable UK British governmental university. Now I've just picked out a couple of points here that I think are important regarding the business school. And regarding the university, but of course you can go on the university's website and you can find out all about its histories and everything else about it. So just to pick out a couple of things, it's been awarded gold, it's been ranked as gold by the government's Teaching Excellence Framework, which is an audit of all the British universities, and you get ranked as either gold, silver or bronze, so it's at the highest level of teaching. And the business school itself recently has been shortlisted 3 years in a row for Business School of the Year, and only 6 business schools are shortlisted each year. So to do that 3 times in a row is pretty good. So I've just picked out a couple of points from the university and the business school, but as I say, have a look at the website and you'll get lots more information about it, about the place. Because I want to get on to talking about this, which is what you're all here to know more about. The Doctorate or the Doctor of Business Administration degree, and in particular the intake that we run here in the United Arab Emirates, where we run the workshops here. Now the very first question I actually get when asked about this is, well actually, what is a doctorate? Now a doctorate is sometimes called a terminal degree. And that's because it's generally speaking, it is the highest degree that you can do. So the normal process is an undergraduate, a master's, then on to doctoral study, and the highest level of study that you can attain. And within those doctorates, we have 2 different types. We have professional doctorates, which are aimed at people who are predominantly involved in a profession. So the one you're probably most familiar with is a medical doctor. They do a professional doctorate, they do an MD. And of course, medical doctors aren't primarily involved with research, they are mostly involved in their industry, in their profession. And there are also professional doctorates for pharmacists. They do a Doctor of Pharmacy. For engineers, DEng. For educators, you can do a doctorate in education for those that still work in the education industry. And so there are all sorts based on professions. And of course, the Doctorate of Business Administration is for business and management people. Those sort of people who are predominantly involved in organizations at the mid to the highest levels and want to get up to the highest levels, or perhaps consultancy or entrepreneurship or something like that. So the DBA is a professional doctorate for business and management professionals. The other type of doctorate is called a research doctorate. And the one you're probably most familiar with is the PhD. Now this just has a different focus. People with these types of doctorates tend to be involved on a daily basis in research type activities. You'll normally find them in universities or perhaps in government research institutes and that type of thing. So they're actually quite similar. They do both involve research, but their aims and audiences are different. Professional doctorates are aimed at industry professionals, the DBA, and the outcome of it needs to be practical. It needs to make some practical difference to business and management. The audience for research doctorates are those who are going down the research and academic route, usually. And then the outcomes of that may be purely theoretical. It doesn't need to be practical. But they're very similar, just different audiences and outcomes. But they're both research degrees, they're both at the same level, and they both mean you can call yourself doctor once you've finished. And I quite like this quote here, actually, which just comes from all business schools. I know it's quite wordy, but I think it's worthwhile, just as a final point on what's the final piece on what's the difference between DBAs and PhDs. So I'll read this out. So PhD programs in business focus intensively on preparing candidates to conduct highly specialized scholarly research. They focus on the development of new theory in management, economics, and related fields. Most PhD and business administration graduates lead to careers as university researchers and professors or as senior researchers in business and government. So that's the research doctorate, the DBA, the professional doctorate. These programs focus on the application of theory, as I mentioned, more practical outcomes, rather than on the development of new theory. The DBA, by virtue of its focus on the application of theory, has more practical application and managerial settings than the PhD. So I think those two quotes are just a nice little, quite nicely sum up the differences between the two. But of course, they're not clear-cut. Plenty of people with PhDs still work in industry, and there's plenty of people in business schools who have DBAs. So it's not a clear-cut distinction, but you get the idea, the difference between a professional and research doctorate. So onto this DBA then. So what sort of things do DBA students actually research? These are topics from students on our intake who are in the thesis stage. So they can do anything within the business and management realm, and I've just picked these completely at random, but these are some of the content, some of the topics some of our students are studying. We've got a critical examination of a performance management system. We've got someone looking at leadership styles and employee performance. An assessment of corporate governance in the public sector. Assessing the value chain in a manufacturing business. I've got another person looking at reasons for investing in high-tech startups. And that person is particularly interested in the non-financial reasons for investing in high-tech startups. Got somebody looking at resolving project conflicts in a project management environment, and then somebody else is looking at agile project management. So as you can see, it touches on any part of business or management. It can be HRM, it can be organizational behavior, it could be finance, accounting, business ethics, business analytics, anything at all, as long as it fits within that business and management. So that's the sorts of things they study. How do we teach the program? Well, how is it structured? Now, you'll see at the top of my slide there that the next start date for the DBA program, which is the 8th United Arab Emirates intake, is on the 14th of November, which is just a month away. That's when the first 3-day workshop is. Now, the applications have closed for that intake. Applications close 6 weeks before the program begins, the workshop. So for you guys, you'll be aiming to start next year on the, which will be the 9th, intake 9, which begins on the 4th, 5th, and 6th of June. That's when the first workshop is. Now, bear in mind that that seems a long way away, but it's not, because you need to take 6 weeks off of that, because that's the final date for applications. So already you're back to about April. And you also need time to get your documents together. You need to write your research proposal and send it to me if you wish to get some feedback. There's a lot of things to do between now and then, and the time goes quickly. So my advice, always get those applications in as soon as you can, really. There's no need to wait just until the deadline. In fact, I say don't wait to the deadline. Make sure you get it in much earlier than that. So anyway, that's when the next program starts, 4th to the 6th of June, and this is how it's taught. You have 2 years where you are taught, basically you're taught everything about how to research, and you're taught about particularly how to research in a business and management environment. So you study those 7 modules, and they are spread out over the first 2 years. So each of them has a 3-day workshop, and then you'll be working with your tutor for the next about 8 to 10 weeks until you start your next module. So for those of you traveling here to the United Arab Emirates, you need to do it 7 times over 2 years. Now, your academic consultant at Stafford, I'm sure, has already sent you the exact timetable, which has the dates of every one of these workshops. If they haven't, please do let them know. But the first 2 years, the Northampton professors all fly from Northampton. They come here to the United Arab Emirates. They take the workshop, and then they work with you through what we call Nile, which is an online environment, until you move on to your next module. So that's the first 2 years. The second 2 years is when you do your thesis, and that's when you'll have 2 supervisors and a director of study, and that's all independent study. So there's no more travel involved with that. So the program is 4 years long, 2 years is taught, 2 years is your thesis. Okay, the types of assessment that we have on the program, it varies. It varies depending on the module. And your tutors, or rather your professors on each of the modules, will tell you exactly how you're going to be assessed, but they can be anything from an essay to a seminar presentation, to a portfolio, research report, a reflective report. You even do a full research proposal at the end. So during those 2 years, there's all sorts of different ways that we assess. There are no examinations. That type of thing is very rare at a doctorate level. We tend to be far more involved than that. And then, of course, your thesis is assessed by a viva voce. That simply means an oral exam. So at the end of your thesis, you will have to defend in an oral exam situation your thesis with an external examiner, which means somebody who's not from the University of Northampton. They're from a different UK university. And you'll also have another person who's from the University of Northampton, but will not be your supervisor. And that's the big thing. For that, by the way, you do need to travel to the campus in Northampton. And trust me, after 4 years and you've gotten to that stage, you really want to go there anyway and have your viva there and, you know, just get a whole feeling, because once you pass that, you've finished, of course. And the research thesis is a 40,000 word document. That's what you do in your second 2 years. There is loads and loads of support on this program. There's the international DBA program leader, a lady called Hala. You will meet her. You will have when you go through the application process, you will meet her at the interview stage. You have the local DBA program leader, which is the role that I take. I live here in the United Arab Emirates. You have tutors for every module. At the thesis stage, you have a director of study and 2 supervisors, one who will be based in the Northampton campus, another who will be more local to where whichever part of the world you're coming from. And the idea of that is that we call it a local supervisor, but it's really just somebody who has a particular knowledge of your context, of where you are, for example, the Middle East or Africa. There's administration in Northampton, and if ever you're lost, we can always help you locally at Stafford to find the right person. Now, I briefly mentioned this, the Northampton Integrated Learning Environment, or NILE. Every single module that you have has its own, this is simply a VLE. It's a website where everything is, most of you I'm sure are familiar with them, but it's where we post lecture slides and readings, and there's discussion boards, and we can do video conferencing through it, and all sorts of different things. And every module has its own dedicated NILE site. And the university itself has an extensive online library with hundreds of thousands of articles and books and everything you need to study. So lots and lots of support. Let's get on to what you need to do to get on the program. Standard entry is this, and fairly usual for any doctorate program, a master's degree in a business-related subject, ideally completed within the last 10 years. If it's longer than that, as long as you've shown that you've undergone some sort of training or kept your knowledge up to date in some sort of a way, then that would be okay. We want a minimum of 5 years work experience, at least some of which should be at a senior level, and you should of course be employed. Remember, this is a professional doctorate, so you need to be employed in a leadership and management role capable of supporting the achievement of the learning outcomes. I'm just going to say a few things about the application process because it is important. You know, you are getting onto a doctoral program. It's so important for the university and for yourselves that you've really thought about it, that this is important for you and it's a journey you want to undertake. So you need a CV, and then you need a personal statement where you really need to just let the admissions team know exactly what your motivations for doing a doctorate are, why you want to do it at the University of Northampton, why you're doing a DBA and not a PhD, and importantly, how are you going to find the time? You're all going to be working, you'll have family, all sorts of other commitments. So that's really what the personal statement's about, just letting the admissions team and reflecting yourselves on why you don't want to undertake study at this level. Then there's the references, the certificates and transcripts are fairly straightforward. Evidence of English language if we need it. If your master's degree's in English, we wouldn't. But basically, we'll look at your admissions documents will be looked at, and if we need that, you'll be asked for it. If not, it'll be fine. Then the last 2 bits are important. You will have an interview where, as I mentioned, you'll meet the program leader from the University of Northampton DBA, and you'll also be interviewed by a specialist in the field. So for example, let's say your proposal's in finance, something to do with finance. You'll have Hala, and then you'll have a finance person at this interview. And they're going to ask you all about your research proposal, mostly. They'll also ask you general questions about, you know, your business and your work and what you're doing professionally and things from your CV and personal statement. But what they'll really focus on is that proposal. So you really need to put some thought into this proposal. It's not something you can do in a few hours. You really need to have a think about. It's not very long, it's only 1,000 words, but what you do write, you want to, you know, as I say, just, you know, have a think about it and make sure you can cite some authors in the field, and make sure when you talk to Hala and the other person at the interview that they can get from you that you really have thought about your topic. Of course, this may well change. Most people stay within their topic area, but once you do the first 2 years, you'll probably find, well, you will find, your proposal changes quite significantly, and that's fine. But at this stage, all we're really looking for in that proposal is the applicant capable of studying at doctorate level? Looking at, does the proposed research fit with the nature of a DBA? Remember how I said I had to have practical outcomes? And then importantly, does the university have an appropriate supervisor? Now they can supervise in all the major areas of business and management, but don't make your proposal very narrow. Don't make it very technical. So there may not simply be somebody there who can supervise you. Keep it fairly general at this stage. Just a last word on proposal, because I know this is sort of somewhere where people get tripped up a little bit. The team's going to be looking whether it can make a practical contribution to business and management. They'll look, can you reference using the Harvard system? Can you write a very brief literature review and at least cite 4 or 5 authors who write in that field? And do you have just a basic understanding of research methods? And the very good thing is that all business and management master's graduates should already have these skills. All right, just a few more things from me before I take questions. Program fees. It is very reasonable for this type of program. Remember, it's fly-in faculty. The program is exactly the same as you would do on campus in Northampton. The modules, everything is exactly the same. But to make sure you have the most up-to-date fees, because these things do change with intakes, go to the Stafford Global website and check the fee there, or ask your academic consultant about fees and also how it can be broken down into installments and other things. Why should you do a DBA at Northampton? Think about that as an investment in your future, both in the academic and professional fields. We have had MBA programs with many thousands of graduates operating for a number of years now. That means there's quite a lot of them that are in the workplace. And it is, of course, a very important degree. There's no denying that. But it does mean that if you really want to set yourself out, set yourself apart as an expert in your field, then moving on to the doctorate will do exactly that. It's the highest qualification in business and management. You'll contribute to business and management practice. It will be expected you'll publish your thesis. You'll have lots of supervision, and then these local workshops from the Northampton professors are all good reasons for why for Northampton. Last word from me, completion of the Northampton DBA will set you apart as an expert able to lead and manage at the highest levels. You will have made a unique contribution to your field and developed outstanding analytical, critical, creative, and reflective skills so needed in today's business world. Having a DBA really does set you out and say you are an expert in your field. You can operate at the highest levels of the business and the corporate and the board level, or you can be a consultant, or you can be a trainer, or you can move into the academic environment at some later stage in your life if you wish. It opens up many, many doors. Okay, that's enough from me. Let's get to questions. The easiest way to do this with a group of you is to use your chat box. If you see it on the right there, I'm just going to bring it in front of me. Rather than opening microphones and doing all that type of thing, the easiest thing is if you just usually tap your questions into that chat box. If I can work out how to get it working, hang on. Right, I should be able to see it. Why can't I see it? That's strange. Let me try this one. Hang on, let me try that one. Questions. Oh, I've opened the wrong one. Sorry, I didn't mean the chat box. I mean the questions box. There we go. Let me just get, I'm onto it now. Here we go. Right, I can see lots and lots of questions. Let me get to the start. Right here. So first question is, can I do the program in a shorter period of time? No, you can't do the first 2 years any shorter because all the workshops are timetabled and your hand-in dates are timetabled. Technically, you could do your second 2 years faster if you're very motivated, although I don't see there being any benefit in doing so. You're far better to use the time. Once you're on the program, you'll recognize that it is intense, it is in depth, you need the time. So I don't recognise it. Work towards that towards the 4-year completion. Is there any chance for me to attend workshops in the UK? As I said, the programs in the UK is exactly the same as it is taught in the UAE. The workshops are 3 days long, the modules are all exactly the same. So technically, yes, but one thing, they start at different times of the year than where we do here in the UAE. So it means the timetables don't always fit. The module you're about to do, it may not be running in the on the on-campus version for another 6 months. So that's just a practical issue about timing that you would need to think about. The other thing is to think about is you're far better to stay with your intake. You will meet people from the on-campus intake when you're doing some virtual work, some virtual seminars and things. So with the face-to-face workshops, it's better to stick with your intake. What would happen if I miss a workshop? Could I have a Skype call with my tutor? Yes. Now, workshops this is a part-time program. It's not online. It is face-to-face, so the workshops are compulsory. However, things happen. And if something happened and you simply couldn't make a workshop, then you would work with your tutor who would do their very best to catch you up. So that's the short answer. Do your very best to get to these workshops. They're so important, but things in life happen. If something happens, you just have to work with your tutor to catch up after the workshop. After the talk modules are complete, can I do the rest of the program on campus? Sure, you could do the second 2 years, you can actually do wherever you liked in the world, because there's no more workshops. You'll be communicating with your supervisors and with your director of studies using Skype and telephone and email or anything. So it really doesn't matter whether you wanted to be in the UK or where you were for those second 2 years. Do I need to purchase any additional textbooks to prepare myself for the program? No, we don't use many textbooks at doctoral level, I'm afraid. The vast majority of it is journal articles. If there are any books you need, you'll be able to get them through the e-books through the university's library. So don't need to worry about purchasing books. Liz is saying, will I be able to meet my supervisor here in the UAE? That obviously means you're here in the UAE, Liz. Yes, you will have a local supervisor. But remember what I said, it doesn't mean they're going to necessarily be living in the same country as you are or the same city, although it does happen. Coincidentally, I have one of my students lives in the same compound as me in Dubai. So sometimes it happens. But how you're paired with supervisors, they have to be somebody experts in your area. And so that person may not necessarily, even the local supervisor may not be living in your city. But what they will have, there'll be somebody who has a very good understanding, in your case, of the Middle East or the UAE. They either would have worked there, or they may still work there, or they'll have supervised many students there in the past. So you may not be living next to them, but that person will have a very good idea of your context. Or for our African students, we also have a number of supervisors who have a very good knowledge of the African environment. Can I get a list of topics that the university can supervise? That's an easy one. They can supervise anything in business and management, pretty much. It'd only be a very narrow topic that they couldn't supervise. So if you're thinking of anything finance, accounting, whatever, you'll be fine. Where am I? I stopped my DBA studies at another university. Can I get exemptions if I join the DBA program? No, you have to start from the beginning, even if you had started a DBA at another university. The reasons is DBA programs differ a lot depending on which university you go to. So it would be very difficult to map the modules. For example, in an MBA, if you do an accounting module on one MBA at one university, it tends to be very similar to an accounting module on another MBA at a different university. So if you switch between the two, it's fairly easy. But on the DBA program, it's more difficult than that. So you would need to start again. I completed the master's degree about 13 years ago, but you have lots of management experience. Would you be able to apply? Yes, you would. As I mentioned, it's ideally your master's will be in the last 10 years, but if it's older than that, as long as you can show some training courses or in some way you've kept your knowledge up to date, even things you do at work, then that will be fine. The duration of each module, they can be anywhere between 2 and 3 months. And make sure you get the timetable from your academic consultant at Stafford, who will show you, which will tell you exactly when the workshops are and when the assignments are handed in. Are there any additional expenses? Any additional expenses besides the fees? No, there's not. No, there's not. The fees include everything, but of course, if you're not living in the UAE, you would need to pay to get here for the workshops. So your travel and accommodation isn't included, but everything else is. How do I know if I've been selected? Well, you need to go through the application process. So your academic consultant at Stafford will collect all your documents, send them off to the University of Northampton. It goes to the admissions team. They then will they'll look over to make sure all the documents are there and you meet the entry criteria. Then you'll go to the interview stage and you'll be notified of when that interview will be and who it will be with. And very soon after that interview, you'll know whether you've been accepted onto the program or not. But the process does take quite a long time. So I think I mentioned right at the start of the webinar, apply as early as you can, because it does take time to organize the interview and all of these types of things. I've completed my application process, but you haven't heard how it's gone yet. I'm hearing from Hassan here. Should do. I'm not sure. Check with your academic consultant at Stafford. If you don't hear from them, give me an email. In fact, it will be useful if I go onto my email address now. There we are. You should be able to see my email there. I would assume it's still in process, but just check with your academic consultant at Stafford. If you don't hear back, send me an email and I'll follow it up for you. Are there any bursaries offered by the University of Northampton to financially support students? Have a word with your academic consultant at Stafford. If there's anything available, they will let you know. Here's a question about the MBA is more than 10 years old. This one's going back to 2001. That's almost as far back as when I did my MBA. In fact, I think it's about exactly the same time, if I remember. So it's nice to see somebody in my very similar timeline to me. That will be okay as long as, I say, you need to show that you've done some short courses or some training at work or just something to show that you have been keeping your knowledge up to date. So as I say, I'm sure a lot of people now will be doing some sorts of courses through work or maybe on their own accord. Just some short things so you can put on your CV. My MBA was back then, but since then I've done this course and I've done this course and I've done this course, then you should be okay. Where was I? Will there be a need for a second supervisor in addition to the academic supervisor allocated by the University of Northampton? Your supervisors are all academics, although a lot of them are from industry background, have a lot of professional experience. So you do have the two supervisors, and then the director of studies basically oversees the whole thing. Yes, so everybody gets that number of supervisors. I'm just about at the end already. Oh, excellent. Just a message there from Hassan that he's saying he's ready to go. Oh, we're ready to have you on the course as well, Hassan. That would be great. Well, that wasn't too bad. I think I've gotten everyone's questions there. If I haven't, of course, you've got my details here. Remember, I'm here in the United Arab Emirates. I will see you at the very first workshop. I hope I will see you all here. Oh, hang on, I've got one more. Are there areas of specialization you mentioned the only ones available for the DBA, or are there other options? Remember, the DBA in itself doesn't have specializations. You can do a DBA in absolutely anything, business and management, like I showed you on those topics before. So it's actually the person themselves who will specialize. So they might specialize in talent management, or they might specialize in the application of motivation theory, or it might be something to do with balance sheets or whatever. So a DBA by itself, a doctorate, is the person who will specialize, and then they will have experts for their thesis. So if you're thinking about your proposal, you can think about absolutely any area of business and management that you want to study, that you think is important to study. Okay, I think I've got those questions now. As I say, yeah, just if you need any more details, just use my, if you want to discuss more rather, or you have more questions, you've got my details there anyway. As I say, I hope I'll see you all at the very first workshop, which for most of you will be the one in June. Some of you may have already been through the admissions process for November. In that case, I will see you then. But from me, thanks all for listening. As I say, anything else, let me know, and have a great night.